Hello and welcome to Marian's World. Today I'm going to be embroidering some three-dimensional mushrooms, or fungi actually, because they're not a traditional fungus mushroom with a cap and a stem. Or they might be. I don't know how far I'm going to get. But there was a synergy about what happened this morning. Everything just seemed to conspire to make it that I had to just embroider mushrooms. The first thing was I've got the leftover felt from when I've just been doing my butterfly workshops, and that meant I was using the crewel wools. The second thing, my RHS magazine arrived and it's covered with fungi on the front, and that made me go and look on my bookshelf, which I've been tidying, so I knew I still had this. And this is a really old, like a poster about the main edible and poisonous mushrooms and fungi of Britain. And so it's just a really lovely old-fashioned poster. And the last thing, to make it all just mesh together and think, I don't care what I'd planned to do, this is what I'm going to do, was I had my wood delivery. And yet again, there's a piece of bark. And this lovely piece of bark was in among my wood delivery, and I saw it and I thought, oh, mushrooms could grow on that. And so here we are, ready to make some bracket fungi, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the camera down and show you what I'm doing. And I hope it all works out. You know me, I just sit down, don't plan anything, I just get on with it and see what happens. And so we're going to see what happens today. So you can see my supplies are laid out here. I've got a piece of the spare, this is 100% wool felt, and I've got it in my 8-inch hoop, and that's going to be going into my hoop stand. I've got my crewel wools here. I've got a couple of soft pipe cleaners that I thought might just be handy. I've got a nice crewel needle ready to use in my pin cushion. I've got my scissors. I have got my old crochet hooks here because there might just be a bit of micro crochet. Depends whether I get that far. Got my piece of bark so I know what size I need to do anything in. And this is a fungus called turkey tail. It's a bracket fungus. It's quite common here in the UK. It grows on silver birch, and particularly it has these lovely bands of colour. It's going to be my inspiration for setting them down. So I'm going to keep that to one side. So my hoop stands here. I have a light. I'll just pull it down. All the lights on. That's what I was actually looking through to do all the lovely silk embroidery last week. I really enjoyed doing that. It's been so lovely, but really I had to concentrate so much. So this is going to be somewhat of a different thing because I'm going from very fine silk into crewel wool. So first of all, I'm going to need a pattern. I don't need anything very big, and they're sort of semicircular, but I'm going to put a bit of a wavy edge, and I'm just using a soft pencil here. Going to just sort of make a bit of a wavy edge. I think that's probably the biggest I want it to be. And I'm going to curve the top. If I go straight across, it'll be more difficult when I come to try and put it with my bark. So I'm going to make a curved edge here, which means that when I put that straight on the bark, it'll curve the whole thing over, and it'll help with me getting the shape. And so I'm going to do that one first. Actually might just alter this a bit and make it a little bit bigger, like that. It's all going to be stitched over, so it doesn't really matter. And the edge is always sort of cream, and so I'm going to put cream wool in my needle, and I'm just going to lay all this in really with long and short stitch. I'm going to do this starting that I was doing on the silk by just stitching through my tail. I'm going to try that for a while instead of a knot. So there's my tail stitched down, and I'm going to come up on the bottom I'm just going to lay some stitches in. I'm not taking any notice of this line now. I've just extended. And really, it shouldn't be a difficult thing. This is long and short, or thread painting, or whatever you want to call it. It is stitches of different sizes. I'm not going to bother putting a buttonhole edge on, because I am going to just leave a bit extra felt when I cut it out. And another thing I'm going to do, just for helping myself, and so a good thing to help you too, is I'm going to make sure that all my stitches are going to lie as if they're going to the middle, like that. So I'm just going to put those lines on, so that helps me as I stitch to just see where I'm going. And so there's nothing more to it than laying your stitches in and making sure that each stitch you put in is either longer or shorter than the stitch you did before. But you don't have to worry about keeping the long stitches the same size or the short stitches the same size. It really is just make some longer, make some shorter. And I do want this to look like proper bands in the end. I don't want it totally shaded in, but within that I do not want sort of hard edges between each colour. So I think fungi is so interesting. They do know that the largest organism on the planet is a fungi. Got a feeling it's America somewhere. It's under one of the forests. I think it's one of the honey fungus. Now, honey fungus actually do kill trees off, but it's the mycelium, it's their underground structure. But underground, it is still a fungus. It's the mycelium of the fungus. And so I'm sure they said it was a couple of thousand years old. And they know it's the same one over thousands of square miles, which is mind-boggling, really. I plant with mycorrhiza, which is a fungus, and you add it to your plant roots. You sort of buy the mycorrhiza as either a granular thing or a powder, which then you can add to your planting hole or sprinkle onto the roots of your plants, particularly roses. And it helps the plants get established. People call it the wood wide web now. But you never used to hear that term, but you can understand it totally. It means that everything's interconnected in the woodland. The trees are connected to the plants, are connected to each other. Things are more connected than we ever knew about, I think. Anyway, I am going to finish this cream right the way over both sides, and then I'll decide which colour I'm going to do next. I've put a next layer in, and I just forgot to turn the camera back on because I was just enjoying myself. However, I have got this brighter orange, so I've put that in, which is Appleton's. It's actually 697. However, it's not quite bright enough for me, and I want to make some other sort of a bit of colour. So I've got this paler bit, and I've got these which are a bit more orangey. I'm just going to go through here and just put the odd bit of striping in. I was wondering about doing it at the end, but I'm just going to do it now. And so I just want to give it some variation. And as you can see, by not doing satin stitch, I've got this lovely edge here where it's just really nice to see the line of the colour change, but not be a hard edge like it would if it would have been satin stitch. So this is the next layer going on this bit. I'm not trying to make the colour go further up really. But the colour afterwards that I'm going to be putting in will be this silvery grey and possibly a white. Might do a white and a grey together. So through here with this orange. It doesn't have to be too regular. In fact, I can skip along a bit. I hope they're going to work out all right. I just sort of saw the man delivering my wood, went out to make sure it was looking fine stacked up, saw the bit of bark, and then it was, that's it, that's what I'm doing. So to say there's been no prep for this would be an understatement. It's just me doing stuff as per usual. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people stitching mushrooms at this time of year, with it being autumn here in the UK. But I think nearly everybody, I don't know, everybody's, you just want that mushroom with the red and white, the, what is it, fly agaric. I thought, no, I need to do ones I see. I don't see them so much here. I mean, I would if I went out for a big walk somewhere, but I have silver birch in my garden. Not that it's got bracket fungus on it, but it's a really common fungus here. And they're so pretty. And so that was it. Decision was made. Look at that. That orange has just lifted that colour entirely. And when I look, I'll just show you the picture again. When I look at the picture, you can see that there are lines coming through that sort of still come down to the bottom sometimes, and that the colours, although the bands are separate, they sort of, you know, it's not like a big hard drawn line. I think what I was going to do, and I'm going to lay in sort of the big bands of colour. So I've got the cream, this orangey colour, going to go to the grey and white and then back to orange, and then I'll put these fine bands over the top of everything. That's how I'm thinking it would work the best. I was going to do mushrooms ages ago, and when I say ages ago, I mean like when I first started my channel. I think it was in the first Choose My Project. I had this old lampshade, this glass lampshade, and the plants weren't growing very well in it. And I took them out and I thought, oh, I'll make some mushrooms and I'll make a little landscape. And it just never got done. And there is actually a plant growing in that now. So I don't have that lampshade to put mushrooms in. But I've been wanting to actually embroider mushrooms for all that time. Well, I didn't have any white. I didn't even have any white knitting wool. Actually, I could have looked for tapestry wool. I've split that down before. I might have a look there. But I'm just using the cream again. I'm using slightly longer stitches, and as you can see, they're just going in just slightly into the little orange band, and I'm making them a little bit longer or shorter at the top and just fitting them in. And I'll be going over this with the grey when I've got this band finished. And I just stitch into, not really thinking, so there's 2 short stitches there as I go down to that point, and then I'm going to come back up with a long one. I don't really take any notice of the length of the stitches I've already put down here. I'm just stitching into it so that the stitches grade in. And then look, I'm going to do a really big long one there. And it just can be as free form as that. You don't really have to think about it too much, as long as you are heading all your stitches in the direction that you've already decided. Normally I'd say put a little framework on, but it didn't seem to need that this time because I'm doing the horizontal bands. I'm not grading the colours down. And so all I needed were the little pencil marks to help me keep the angle of the stitches in the right direction. But it's looking good so far. So once I've actually stitched this one to its entirety, I will draw another, well, at least another 2, but I'll just see how many I can get done, because I still then have to put them together with the sort of idea I have for how it's going to work. There'll be lots of things like fungal forays going on in here. I don't know whether you do that in other countries. I imagine you do. Have people who sort of take you on a walk through the woodland and either just identify, or quite often here you're sort of shown which ones you can pick, and you go with your baskets, and then sometimes they have a big cook up at the end, and you can taste ones you're probably never going to see anywhere else. I'm not sure whether they do that in other countries, but I don't see why they wouldn't. I've put myself an extra little line here going around, because I need this edge to be a little bit more defined than I have on them, because as I look in the photograph I can see there's quite a nice brown line going around there, and so I'm going to keep the grey a little bit more tightly stitched, and I'm keeping the grey to the top of the band, but just occasionally I'm doing a very long stitch into the cream, which just helps to break things up. It doesn't matter on things like this that are natural, if you are over stitching or putting your thread further into what you've already worked. Even though I've got a big long cream stitch here, if I want to I can just go straight over it and take my needle further down. I've come back in because I was starting just to fill this in, and I thought this is actually a really good area where the framework method works very well. So my pencil lines have just worn off with my stitching, but if I put them back in, you sort of want all your stitching to lie as if it's coming to the middle like that. And so that means there's actually a lot of stitches here that have to fit in a small amount there, and some people can get a bit concerned of how to do that. And also if you just start at the beginning and you start to try and come round, it can be quite hard to get your stitches in the right angle. And so what I always do is put a framework in. So I'm just going to randomly go along the edge of here, and ignoring everything else that I've already done, I'm just going to lay my thread as if it's on one of these lines, and I'm going to stitch it down wherever that comes to that point, and I'll just go up further along. And each time I'm just going to put the stitch where I can see it needs to go. So I'll just work along. So that's even on the line there, look. Put the framework in, and then that means I can work back and forward, thickening this piece of embroidery up, and you will automatically get less stitches at the top than you have at the bottom, because it's just a method of going in there. You can see exactly where your stitches are going to need to go. So there's my framework. And so now I can work back across. I can say, oh well, I can put a stitch in there. So up I come, and I do put a stitch in there, and I've made it shorter than the ones before. I'll come here. Where does it need to go? Sort of down there. I'm not going to bother about that little bit at the minute. Work back along, put them in shorter if you want. Put them in longer if you want. But all the while now you have 2 stitches each side of you that sort of mean that it's obvious where your needle would have to go down. Now I don't necessarily work my way back and forwards in quite this fashion, but if you're just starting out with long and short stitch and this type of needlework, then it's a helpful way to get your hand and brain into the idea of where to put the stitches. So now as I come back through, I've got smaller areas here to fill in, but I can see that if I pull that there, I can take that down, and here I can either go up here, but I'll be on top of this stitch here. Just get my I'll get my scissors. If I come up there, I'm going to be on top of this stitch here. So actually it's probably more helpful to do a short stitch there. So I'll put a short one in. And you see how it sort of starts to go together. And if I put that needle back up to that place, it's actually more logical to fill this space in. And all of a sudden your outside edge is being filled in without the crowding of so many stitches at the top. I'll go up a bit there. Might have to get 2 stitches in that bit, but no, it's sort of filled in. I'm going to put a tiny one in there. Here I can go further up. I can sort of either come down here or I can go further up. I think I want to go further up. And then that sort of automatically makes me come lower down here to get that one in. And all of a sudden your stitches are just sort of melting in together because of course it's the lovely crewel wool as well. And I've got less stitches here already. And as long as you're doing one longer or shorter than what you're next to, you can't go wrong. So I can do exactly the same thing to finish it right to the top. So let me go up to here, going to come down, and this is going to be even less stitches need to be here. But again, it's just making sure that each stitch is longer or shorter than the one you have beside it. So here I can see I've got a gap going right the way down there, and I'm going to put my stitch right the way down. I'll come up a bit further along. Where does this stitch need to go? It sort of can go there. It's not really in the same angle. It sort of needs to go there. I can go in between those two. I'll put a short one in to fill that piece. And carry on going around. I'm splitting all of the stitches. I'm not going into the same hole. I'm going to do quite a long stitch here, so I'll come right up there and into there. Short one. And I'm going to miss that bit out and go down into here. That's why my framework method works, because it sort of takes the guesswork out of where to put your stitch. And I always feel it's an easy way for beginners particularly to learn about the angles of the stitches and where they need to put them. So here I'm going to go right the way up and right the way down. And I'm nearly there. It's going to be a bit more horizontal. This is just waiting to put the little orange in again. So this time I'm going to just come up within everything, take the little orange stitch in, and it can fill up all the gaps. I've picked out these 3 colours now. I've got black and this lovely warm brown and a sort of a creamy beige. I've got the warm brown in first, and I'm just going to go into the first orangey stripe, and I'm going to just do little, I think it's even too much to do a stem stitch, so I'm actually going to just split stitch along. So that means I'm taking my thread down in a small stitch, but then I'm coming up within the stitch. So I'm actually not doing a back stitch or anything. I'm coming up within the end of that stitch. And it's a finer line than if I did stem stitch. going to keep my stitches quite small because I'm embroidering quite a small piece of bracket fungus. And already it's making a difference. So it'd be nice to do, going to take the black and do the join here. So I left as more of a hard edge there, but that's so I can get one of these stripes in. Look at that, what a difference it makes. It'd be nice to get a few stripes in, but I don't think I will. And as I said before, I'm always looking, so I'm looking at my image, even though I'm not copying it piece by piece. I want the flavour of my stitching to be the bracket fungus. So I just sort of keep thinking, you know, these are the curves I need to show, this is the way it needs to be, and then my needle manages to go in the right places. I think I'm making these stitches at the minute about 1/4 of an inch, and my little bracket fungus itself is about about 4.5 inches across. I feel as if maybe I don't do enough crewel embroidery on my channel, or just in real life. I don't maybe use it very often, and so it's what got me sort of thinking, what would I stitch in crewel wool? And then the magazine came, and then I looked for the poster, and then the man came and delivered the wood all on the same morning. So it just was a total, the universe was telling me to stitch a fungus. That's what I think. Okay, that's that one done. Oh, lovely. I'm going to put the black one in there. I'll just finish that off. I'll finish this one off underneath. The black line is going in the identical way. It's just going through the join between the grey and the orange. And then this slightly pale yellow one is doing exactly the same too. I'm going to count that one as done. I've added another little beige line from the beige thread there, and there could be loads more. I'd encourage you to go and have a look at some bracket fungi online. The patterns and the colours are really beautiful. Before I cut this out to finish it off, I want to not waste my felt, and I'm going to just draw on another couple of patterns, and I'm just going to make sort of that sort of a shape for the top. It'll make for a more crinkled over one with just sort of a, you know, it doesn't have to be anything. I'm going to do another one. I'll do a little one, and then I'll do one here too. If I get these done, it'll be a miracle, but never mind. I've got all of my bracket fungi stitched now, and I've ended up doing 7. Another thing to note is that I started off making a really wiggly edge, but after I did that one and this one, I realised actually I should make a smoother edge, because I'll just bring my photograph in. The only reason these look wiggly is because it's a 2D representation of a 3D structure, and the wiggliness is just a feature of us looking at a picture. So because mine are going to be a 3D structure, I don't need to make the wiggly edge. So these last ones are a lot more smooth, and that one I flared out a lot, hoping to get a different sort of a different shape once I start to manipulate it. And for this one, I think I'm going to smooth off this lobe here once I start putting it together. So first things first is to just roughly cut out each shape. And then we can start getting things going. It's just an experiment, you know. This is what I hope to show when I'm doing these sorts of things. Last time I did anything with bark was the green vessel, which ended up being 4 videos because it took me so long to do. But that's fine, isn't it? We're allowed to experiment and try things, and I hope, if nothing else, it shows you that you can do that too. You can just start somewhere and see what happens. It doesn't always have to work. And even if it works a little bit, you'll have learned something. And in the end, it's all about learning and trying to move forward with wherever you are. And not everybody is as far along on the journey of whether it's sewing or painting or woodwork or knitting. But to get there, you have to just keep practicing. And for me, practicing means sort of stretching myself and trying to do things that come into my head. I think, I don't know how to do that. Well, I just start somewhere and work it out as I go, which is what I'm doing today. Okay, so now that they are totally roughly cut out, I'm going to carefully cut them out. And I'm actually going to leave about 1/8 of an inch of felt because I'm going to be sewing these together with an under pattern. And so I don't need to cut right up to the embroidery. Plus, this is felt, it's not going to fray. So that's why I didn't feel the need to put in a blanket stitch edge or anything like that. And eventually it's going to be sort of manipulated somehow. So I'm going to need an under one as well. So I'm just going to put it on my spare felt, get a piece big enough that's going to fit on there. I'll just draw around it instead, and then I'll cut the pattern just the tiniest bit smaller. Soft pencils are so good for marking things. So I'm going to cut inside the drawn line. It'll help start the curve off when I sew them together. Well, there's the back of my work, by the way. And so it's a little smaller all the way round. And I'm going to do that with all of them. I would like the edge to be able to be manipulated. And so before I sew my pieces together, I'm going to take this pipe cleaner and I'm just going to tack it just inwards from the edge. I don't want it to impact what I am stitching when I stitch them together. I just wanted to keep in its place. Now, I do have some uncovered wire which I could have used either, but this came to hand and that's what I'm going to use, and I think it's quite easy to find if you're wanting to do the same. And now I'm going to put my under one on top, and from the top I'm going to sew them together, and I just need to start here somewhere, and I'm going to overcast into the embroidered edge. As I put them together, it's just going to roll inwards that little bit, which is what I want, because that's why I've cut my pattern that little bit smaller on the back. It means that the front edge can just roll over that a little bit to make the edge more disguised in. So I don't need to particularly be doing tiny stitches because I'm using a matching wool. And as it comes, as I pull up, I help that top edge just roll over the top. If you can see how that is just going in nicely. Anyway, I'm going to get all of them done. They don't need to be stuffed. There's plenty thickness just in the 2 layers of felt and all the embroidery. You can see that all my stitching is here. And you can see the stitching because the underneath pattern is smaller than the top pattern, and what it means is the top embroidery is curving down, and so the stitching seam is there rather than right on the edge. And so I'm going to try and do that with this one even more and get this particular lobe really curled down so that when I'm finished I have a smoother edge. And I've also realised that even though I cut the pattern a little bit smaller, because I am sending it in so much, it means that once I've done the edge, there's a lot of excess at the minute that looks about the same, but by the time I've finished this edge, this will be poking out like that, and then I just go and cut it off, and I cut it smaller again, and I think that's fine. You just have to do it as you go. There's no way of making that pattern before you've done it. It's just the same as tailoring a collar on a jacket or a dress, where you have the undercollar slightly smaller so that the actual top collar rolls over the top and hides your seam. And so it's the same principle that I'm using here. My thumb actually helps that roll over, and so I don't pull this pattern up to it, I pull this one down. I think that's worked good enough for me. You can see the point is underneath, but it doesn't matter, it's gone underneath. And if I pull this ever so slightly and just sort of press, I can get my excess felt here. I just go and cut that bit off. And even I can manipulate it even more by pushing that in more. I'll give a big roll to here, and can you see that lovely shape that's come there? So I'm going to try and preserve that really nice shape, because look how short I've made that now. So when I pull those edges in together, it's actually going to dish that a bit, and then I'll be curving it, and even more it's going to look the shape of the bracket fungus. This is my last seam, and then I'm ready to go forward. So here they all are finished, and I am very happy with the way they look. And so I've got them all ready. I can manipulate their edges to make them wavy as if I want to, like that, and they're going to hold it because of the wire. So now I'm actually ready to start and organise the bark. However, I think it's going to need a bit of organising, and I've already got so much footage, so I think I'm going to make this into a two-parter. I'll just show you how I'm thinking about it. This is my original piece of wood. It's going to be attaching these onto here. Now, the easiest thing would be just to glue them, and as I curve them, that curve will go straight. So that's why the curve's on there. And the bigger the curve, like, let's have a look, like that one, so a flatter curve won't have to go so far, and a big curve will have to go further. So that one will curve a little bit, like that. I'll show you on the side, like that. And then this one will curve a lot to get the flatness. So that one would be more like that. And the thing is, I don't like to put glue. I know lots of people use glue sticks and glue, and I just don't like to glue my embroidery. So I'm not quite sure about that. I'm going to leave it there with my lovely pieces of bracket fungus ready to install. And the colours are already look lovely. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave it there. I do have my lovely pieces of bracket fungus. I'll show you one close up. And I am super happy with how they've come out. But in all honesty, there's just no way I can get this done on 1 week's video. So it'll either be next week or the week after, because I've got the second part of the crochet having to come as well. It keeps me busy. I'm going to link you to the stitched vessel videos. There are 4 of them in the little playlist. I'm going to put them on the end here, and you can see how else my actual firewood bark inspired me to make something. You might enjoy it. Bye for now. See you next week.